And we keep things rolling here on the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. You can also catch me on Bear Era every single week. The newest episode has dropped as we find out if Ryan Poles is on Kevin Warren's naughty list this holiday season. Find us wherever you get your Bear podcast at Bear Era Pod or on YouTube. Subscribe to us. Watch the video version at Bear Era Pod. Thank you to our amazing sponsors at Homage and Blue Wire Podcast Network for bringing that up. And of course, thank you all for keeping it tuned in to the Sports Cubicle. And it's been a busy edition here on the show. And for there being college football playoffs, for there to be the Christmas games coming up for the NFL, baseball has really been a big part of this episode. And it's been moves made by the White Sox, the Cubs, big players coming, big players going. But this story is big in so many different levels. And it is something that I think a lot of us weren't sure was ever going to happen. And I think a lot of us have a lot of different opinions depending on your age group and what age you were when this was at its peak of its powers. And that's Sammy Sosa coming back to the Chicago Cubs, because on December 19th, this was released. I left it all on the field for the Cubs and Cub fans because I wanted to win and make the fans happy. I love to see the fans at Wrigley in right field bleachers every home game. I understand why some players in my era don't always get the recognition that our stats deserve. There were times I did whatever I could to recover from injuries in an effort to keep my strength up to perform over 162 games. I never broke any laws, but in hindsight, I made mistakes and I apologize. We accomplished great things as a team, and I worked extremely hard in the batting cage to become a great hitter. Cub fans are the best in the world, and I hope that fans, the Cubs, and I can all come together again and move forward. We can change the past, but the future is bright. In my heart, I have always been a Cub, and I can't wait to see Cub fans again. Sincerely, Sammy Sosa. Which was then a response from Tom Ricketts, the executive chairman of the Chicago Cubs. We appreciate Sammy releasing a statement and for reaching out. No one played harder or wanted to win more. Nobody's perfect, but we never doubted his passion for the game and the Cubs. It is an understatement to say that Sammy is a fan favorite. We plan on inviting him to the 2025 Cubs convention. And while it is short notice, we hope that he can attend. We're all ready to move forward together. So I think for a lot of people that are outside of Chicago and out of a certain age, don't quite understand what Sammy Sosa meant to the city of Chicago and to the game of baseball. I was 8 years old in 1998, 13 in 2003. And obviously a teenager when all of the cork bats and the broken boombox and the getting traded and the Senate hearings and all that. It's a complicated history with Sammy Sosa and Cub fans, Sammy Sosa and baseball. But you had to be there to understand what Sammy meant to this city. That summer, after the Bulls win their final championship, Michael Jordan is retiring. Sammy Sosa really put this entire city on his shoulders. And there were some great players that played for the White Sox, Frank Thomas being the best example. But it was different with Sammy. Sammy was mainstream. He hit the zeitgeist of pop culture. And I think none of us, we would have to be naive to say he, on some level, we don't believe he took performance-enhancing drugs. But we also know it was encouraged by baseball. Chicks dig the long ball. You guys might be too young if you're listening to this segment, but that was literally a mantra used by Major League Baseball and its networks. Chicks dig the long ball. They weren't testing for these steroids. They were encouraging these players to do this, both hitters and pitchers. And it saved the game of baseball because baseball itself tried to destroy themselves with that strike in the mid-90s. Hell, it might have cost the White Sox and the Expos a World Series appearance for each franchise. Personally, I don't think Sammy Sosa needed to apologize to anybody. My personal opinion, Sammy should have been brought into the family with the Ricketts and have his jersey retired, been part of Cubs convention for years. I understand. Sammy was hard to get along with a lot of people, was not a great teammate, rubbed people the wrong way, and did break rules in retrospect. But the reason why Wrigley Field is the cathedral it is now with its renovations, it's worth as much money as it is. It has the fan base that it does, the fervor that it does. Wrigleyville is now an entire little part of the city, is because of Sammy Sosa's bat. Is because Sammy sold out Wrigley Field for years and years and years when that Cubs team couldn't sell a ticket for free to fill out the bleachers or near the dugout or behind home plate. This team that you watch right now that has their own network wasn't that team when Sammy got there. Sammy put them there. There have been some great players in Cubs history. Nobody has done what Sammy did for that franchise. All these things can be true, but I think it's a little hypocritical for Tom Ricketts, who didn't own the team, was just a fan when Sammy was at his peak, when all this was going on, to demand an apology. What fan in Chicago, at least in 2024, is demanding Sammy Sosa come out and apologize? You apologize to us. For what? For doing what everybody else did? This franchise did a lot of grandstanding and we're on their high horse, but did a lot of shady stuff to win a World Series, aka Aroldis Chapman. So let's not pretend that Addison Russell didn't play for this team. And this is not throwing rocks or shade, but people who live in glass houses, right? So why did it take so long for Sammy to be invited? Contrition? Is that really what it is? You wanted to humble him? It's the reason why your team is worth it is, and we have expectations that you should be spending more on your roster. Now, that is the cynical part of me, the fan in me, the 8-year-old, the 13-year-old that watched Sammy take over Chicago, save Chicago sports, save baseball alongside Mark McGwire and Barry Bonds. People who have now been blacklisted for all different reasons. And look, I'm not here to cape and I'm going to tell you these guys deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I would put them in the Hall of Fame. I think the Hall of Fame is the history of baseball. And you could put whatever plaque, any designation that you want. But the internet exists. Google is real. So everybody knows what had happened in the 90s, in the 2000s. You can't change that. But I do think it was a little ridiculous this entire time that you had Tom Ricketts sitting here being judge, jury, and executioner for something that he was never a part of, that made his team, that has just been a big part of his family's portfolio, so much money. But it is a good thing. It is great for Cub fans. It's good for Sammy because I'm sure Sammy's going to make a couple bucks now that he's not going to be able to go, or he's never going to be in baseball's Hall of Fame. He can be part of the Cubs Hall of Fame. 21 is going to get retired. He gets to go to Jewel Osco's and conventions and big time parties as a Cubs ambassador. When and if they ever win another World Series, he will be there when Fox does the legends that come out the dugout. We will get to see him run from the dugout to right field. The man was part of amazing baseball moments. After 9/11, hitting the home run with a little flag, running to right field with the flag and a cheering bleachers of Wrigley Field, iconic in baseball lore. He's a part of it all. I do believe all these guys should have apologized a lot longer, a long time ago, like Andy Pettitte. Get ahead of it. We would have forgiven you. Everybody would have moved on. Unfortunately, Sammy, while I think he didn't have to, or when he should have, didn't do it on time. But now that we're here, this is only good news. This is only good news because you are no longer hiding your history. And then we're seeing reports that Marquis wasn't playing Sosa highlights almost based off a mandate. Imagine that. Imagine not being able to play Michael Jordan, Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, Walter Payton, Frank Thomas, Mark Burley, Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taze, Marian Hossa, Candace Parker. Name your favorites. Mallory Swanson, right? Like any of your favorite athletes, all if you can't name their highlights, you can't play them. Because of why? Because an owner who wasn't there was looking for an apology. It frustrated me that it took this long, but I'm glad we're here. Better late than never, right? Better late than never, because at least now Sammy will get his flowers in front of over 34,000 people, a sold-out Wrigley Field next summer. We want to know your thoughts. Sammy Sosa is now being welcomed back to the Chicago Cubs. Make sure you are listening to the Sports Cubicle over at WCPT.com, heartlandsignal.com. Check out the SoundCloud if you missed any one of our segments or interviews at WCPT 820 SoundCloud, the Sports Cubicle, and make sure you're subscribing to us on the YouTube channel over at the Sports Cubicle. We have a jam-packed edition left of this episode of the Sports Cubicle, so keep it tuned in to WCPT 820 AM Chicago and heartlandsignal.com. I'm Mike Mercado.